any fear. I've been flying from town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been all around the globe trying to protect your soul. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Yeah. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Yeah. Feel like a dynamite, ready to explode right up in the sky. I need you to listen, I need you to hear, and don't show any fear. I've been flying from town to town, from London to Taiwan. I've been all around the globe trying to protect your soul. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Yeah. We are heroes tonight. We will fly above the sky. We are heroes tonight. Yeah. Feel like a dynamite, ready to explode right up in the sky. I need you to listen, I need you to hear, and don't
Okay,
show
good afternoon, and welcome to Clayton County Library Systems Virtual Graphic Novel Club. Today we are going to be talking about Marvel's Daredevil. My name is Erica, and Roland, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Gotta unmute my microphone.
Okay, so Roland and I are going to be talking about Marvel's Daredevil today, and we're going to first jump in with sort of the history of Daredevil and his backstory, and Roland's going to come in with all of his enemies and allies, so character developments. So we will get started now. All right. Daredevil debuted in 1964. Number one, that's the one on the left there. April 1964. He was created by Stan Lee and artist Bill Everett. Jack Kirby, the other most popular artist at Marvel, had some character input, but this was one of the ones that he was not a part of. As you can see there, Daredevil started off with the yellow suit. Roland's going to talk about that a little bit later. But yeah, the man without fear is what his tagline was. So as a boy, Matt Murdock, that's Daredevil, was lost his sight to radioactive solution and gained superhuman senses in the process. The accident taught him to live without fear. His nickname as a kid was Daredevil, even before he lost his sight, because in the neighborhood of Hell's Kitchen, where he grew up, he would go around and do death-defying acts that the neighborhood kids started calling him Daredevil. His mother left the family at a young when Matt was young. So his father, who was a prize fighter named Jack, raised him. When Jack was a prize fighter in Hell's Kitchen, on and off, but he was also a bodyguard for some of the local gangsters in the area too. So, but Matt was young. He helped save a blind man's life by pushing him out of the way of a truck that was about to hit him, and the radiation that spilled from the truck got into Matt's eyes, causing him to go blind. But in the process, he gained all of his super senses after that. Matt went into recovery. His father stopped fighting for a little while during this time also. But as Matt recovered, he refused to feel sorry for himself. So he started training with a blind martial artist called Stick in the neighborhood. Stick was kind of harsh with Matt, but he gained some useful teachings, and he wanted Matt to hone his skills so that he could pretty much live on his own, and again, without fear. Matt's father was murdered when he was in college. He had gone back to prize fighting later in life. He was winning a few fights, doing well, and but a local gangster called the Fixer wanted Jack to fix one of his fights. So instead of Jack taking the fall, he decided to actually win his fight to make his son proud, because his son had come to his fight. And afterwards, the Fixer had Jack murdered, and Matt vowed to seek vengeance for his father's death. So with the training that he got from Stick, he tracked down all of the Fixer and his entire gang and brought them to justice. But in the process of that, he accidentally caused the death of one of the women that hung out with the Fixer. And after that, Stick and Matt parted ways, because Stick did not believe in killing, and he, from that point on, thought that taking a life, Matt, which was an accident, but he basically dropped Matt as a he no longer wanted to be his mentor anymore. So Matt brought those people to justice, but he did kill the woman. He goes back to college. He goes to law school. He grows up some more, and then he meets one of his best friends for the rest of his life, which is Foggy Nelson. He also, in this time, and he's in law school, meets one of the love of his lives, Elektra Nochios, who is a Greek. Her father's a Greek ambassador that's in New York at the time, and they go to school together. And so he and Elektra hit it off. They have a whirlwind romance, but their romance ends when Elektra's father is killed and taken hostage by terrorists. So she leaves New York and vows to get vengeance for her father. She becomes the assassin Elektra, which Roland will talk about later. And she begins to hunt down the people who killed her father. Matt goes back to law school, finishes law school, and opens up a law firm with Nelson after law school. But also during this time, he's still honing his skills, and he becomes Daredevil of Vengeance at Night. So that yellow suit there is one of his first suits. He and Matt, whatever cases they cannot, like, they work for the little guy, so they don't go into law to basically make money. What they go into law to do is to find justice for those who can't find justice. So they work for the little man in Hell's Kitchen. They work for the person who can't catch a break. And if Matt can't solve their case in the courtroom, what he does is he solves their case on the street. So he creates this persona Daredevil and goes after those who get away with crime. After their sell at their law firm, you meet law firm of Nelson and Murdoch. They hire Karen Page, who is a huge influence on Matt's life. Also, Karen Page is their secretary, and Matt falls in love with Karen, and they're on and off for a few years. She also knows his secret identity. In the process of knowing his secret identity, she sells his secret identity at one point in time to a buyer called Wilson Fisk, who is also known as one of Daredevil's nemesis, Kingpin. Kingpin gives her money because at that point in time in her life, she had an addiction and she sold his secret to Kingpin, who then used it against him. She and Matt were on and off for years until her death at the hands of Bullseye. All right, so I'm going to talk about a few of Daredevil's abilities. He is known for his heightened senses, which I mentioned earlier, martial arts skills, those are the skills he got from Stick, and his genius intellect. His senses are heightened due to the loss of sight, so the radiation that took his eyes out, but he's also got some superpowers from that. Not really superpowers, but some heightened senses from that. Tactile touch, his fingertips, he can touch things and feel faint impressions. He basically can feel the ink on the page and read from that, read by touch. Smell, he can identify a person and remember a person he spent at least 5 minutes with by scent alone. No matter how they attempt to mask their smell, he can also track an individual through aroma, through a crowd of people at a distance of roughly 50 feet. Auditory, his hearing, he can hear a person's heartbeat from more than 20 feet away, or people whispering on the other side of a standard soundproof wall. He can also tell whether a person is lying through their heartbeat. And taste, he has the ability to remember taste to enable him to determine ingredients in food and drink and samples, as long as there is at least a substantive amount that he can present. He also has something called radar sense that tells him the proximity and the ranges of objects in the room around him. So it's not that he can necessarily see the object, but he can sense it in a sort of like it's not really. I guess I wouldn't call it like he can't see. He can see the shape or something like that, but he can't necessarily see it. He can almost, in a sense, like feel it. So he can't do images, he can't do colors and anything about that, but he can see sort of like heat coming off of something. The downside of these abilities that he has is that if a villain can overwhelm his ability, like these senses, it can take him out for like a certain amount of time. He's trained himself to kind of overcome that, but if they all come at him at once, he can't necessarily like it he can't turn them off, so it overloads him basically, and it takes him out for a little while. Because of his martial arts skills, and he is Olympic trained in gymnastics and boxing, it makes him, he's flipping all over Hell's Kitchen. So, you know, he's a gymnast, and he's a boxer. He's in judo, martial arts. Also, not in this picture, but he carries a walking stick that is actually a billy club. He can be shortened into a billy club, and a javelin and also in one hand. So that's his weapon of choice, that billy club that he uses. So I'm going to hand it over to Roland, and he's going to talk about some of our characters.
Hi, everybody.
I guess costumes.
Yeah, the first character we're going to discuss is Daredevil himself, who's gone through many a costume over the years. Like Erica said before, he started with the yellow, black, and red costume. But before he even got that, if you look 3 panels over and you notice the black costume, which they basically said it was introduced in between 89 and 93 in the Daredevil Man Without Fear titles. That was actually a throwback to his very first costume, because when he first started, he didn't have a costume. And so when they rebooted the series in 89, they brought that costume back. Now, he wore the yellow and black costume for roughly the whole first year of publication. And then in 65, Marvel introduced the classic red uniform, which I think most people are more noticeable of. From 65 up until the late 80s, that red costume was Daredevil's costume. Everybody knew when they saw that costume, even if it didn't have the DD on the chest, you knew that that was Daredevil. In 93, when he got his new costume and this is after the Man Without Fear title. He got himself an armored costume that didn't last too long in the comics. I think they showed it on just a few specific storylines, but it was a toss up between his normal red costume and the armored costume. In 1998, they had a series called Flying Blind, where Daredevil actually goes to work for S.H.I.E.L.D. as a S.H.I.E.L.D. agent. So as you can see, his costume kind of changed. It's really basically a S.H.I.E.L.D. uniform, but it's an all red. Come forward to 2010, when the series, and this is a darker part of Daredevil's history, where he basically gives in to the Beast, who is the demon that the ninja group, the Hand, worships or works for. He took over in order to save Hell's Kitchen. He decided to take over the Hand. He let the Beast into his life, basically was possessed by the Beast. And the costume went from being the red costume and the armored costume to an all black version, which is definitely more sinister. He wore that for a minute, and now in the current comics, he goes back and forth between the black costume and the red costume, but the black costume doesn't look as dastardly as it did back in 2010. With the Netflix series introduced in 2015, they of course brought you back the red costume, and that's a picture of it right there. Next slide, please. Okay, so some of the first allies that you would recognize the name Daredevil being associated with would be the Defenders, and more so recently because of the miniseries that was released on Netflix in 2017. And that team consisted of Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, and Iron Fist. But the Defenders is not a new title at all. It's basically an old title, and they are the new iteration of the Defenders. The original incarnation of the Defenders was basically led by Doctor Strange and included the Hulk, Prince Namor, and the Silver Surfer. And that was back in 71. This new iteration in the comics did not happen until 2017, and that was after the Netflix decided to pick up, or basically had released, Daredevil, Luke Cage, and Jessica Jones, and I think one season of Iron Fist. And so that's when they decided to put that group in print. Next slide. One of his first allies and love interest would be the Avenger that we all know as the Black Widow. She was a Soviet super spy who was trained by the Winter Soldier, and who actually the Winter Soldier in the comics was part of the same group that she was a part of in the beginning after he escaped from basically Hydra. Now, Daredevil got first entangled with the Black Widow as he was disguised as Matt Murdock, and he was defending her as her lawyer when she was on trial for a murder that she did not commit. Um, Basically, in their personal romance, his need to take charge interfered with her sense of independence as she was still recovering from the state-induced brainwashing that she went through for her to become a super agent. Basically, in the comics, and Hawkeye showed up to challenge Daredevil because he was jealous, and she was basically tired of them going through their machinations, and she basically left both of them. Now, you will see the romance between Black Widow and Hawkeye in the Avengers movies, but they would never consummate it because basically she's married to her work and he was married, period. Another one of Daredevil's allies who was also a love interest would be Elektra. Next slide. Okay. She was a bounty hunter, an assassin, and she was basically working for Wilson Fisk when she basically had taken a contract in order to take Daredevil out. But she later learned that Daredevil was Matt Murdock. They teamed up. One of their first fights was them teaming up to fight Bullseye. Now, Bullseye was he was already after Daredevil, but he had gotten to a point where he had a tumor in his brain, and he had started going crazy and thought he was seeing Daredevil some of everybody and anywhere, and started killing people randomly because of his hallucinations. During one of the fights, Bullseye actually impales Elektra on one of her own size, and what this does, this basically cements the hatred that Daredevil and, well, I'm not going to say hatred, but the animosity that goes between Daredevil and Bullseye, with Bullseye being one of his greatest enemies. After a while, after Elektra was brought back, she was brought back by the Hand as their assassin. And because the Hand was basically dealing with basically the supernatural, the demonic, they were able to mind control her. And they had resurrected various superheroes that had fallen as their own personal army, as part of their personal army, which normally consisted of demonic ninjas. Now, in the comics, this was not really shown in the Elektra movie that was released back in 2005, but in the comics, Wolverine is the one who basically freed Elektra. But in the process of Elektra being freed, she ended up being killed herself and resurrected again as a Hand warrior. So basically, she went from working for the Hand to being, co-opted by them. Next slide. Another one of his allies, and hopefully we'll be seeing this character pretty soon in the Marvel universe, in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, that is Echo, who is Maya Lopez, who is basically another assassin whose father was a mob enforcer who worked for the Kingpin, and the Kingpin killed her father. But in order to kind of take the blame away from him, he hatched a scheme that basically put Daredevil in Echo's crosshairs. And the way that he did this is he invited her, well, arranged for her to meet Daredevil in his alter ego as Matthew Murdock. After she found out, she basically tried to attack Daredevil. And when she found out that Kingpin was lying about it, she basically attacked the Kingpin and blinded him, which was only a temporary thing in the comics. Um, Later on, Echo becomes a new Avenger after she's being referred to Captain America by Daredevil. And she basically takes the name Ronin. Okay. So Echo, if you look her up, Echo has has another alter ego, and that's Ronin, which you can actually Hawkeye becomes Ronin later as well. Some of his other allies, non-superhero allies, would be Foggy Nelson and Ben Urich. Foggy Nelson was his college friend who they actually decided to open their practice together, and Ben Urich was the reporter that always fed them information. Some other notable allies that we won't get into, mainly because we've already discussed them in previous graphic novel discussions, or they were discussed earlier as part of the intro of Daredevil. Captain America, Spider-Man, with whom Daredevil actually shares a large amount of his villains in the Marvel universe. Spider-Man and Daredevil kind of come across the same villains all the time. Daredevil has worked with Deadpool. And of course, there's a picture of Stick, who was Daredevil's mentor, and White Tiger, who is actually one of the new Avengers. Let's get to his enemies. Now, he's got two enemies that come first and foremost when you think the name Daredevil. The first being Kingpin, Wilson Fisk. He's one of the mainstays of the Marvel Universe criminal underworld, and his powers are that he produces tremendous physical strength and he basically utilizes his mob ties to run the city. So he doesn't really have any major superpowers except for his strength. And one thing that I saw was that it doesn't matter who he goes after. It doesn't matter whether there's a superhero or just the regular average person, which brings him always into conflict with Spider-Man, Daredevil, and the Punisher. Up here you see pictures of the Kingpin from the comics, him being portrayed in the 2003 film Daredevil, and the current actor that portrays him in the Netflix series. Another one of Daredevil's biggest enemies, and I think this is the one that most resonates with all after Kingpin, would be Bullseye. He was a freelance assassin who often worked for Kingpin. And some of his early endeavors included time in Africa and Nicaragua, where he came into conflict with the Punisher while he worked alongside Deadpool. But they were both mercenaries. At one point in time, Bullseye basically was defeated, and a Japanese crime lord basically put him through the same process that Wolverine went through to basically lace his bones with adamantium, which in the Marvel Universe, adamantium is one of the strongest metals out there, along with the metal that comes from Wakanda. Bullseye, like I said before, Bullseye had been declared insane at one point in time because of a brain tumor, and just basically believing random people were Daredevil, he was trying to kill them. When he killed Elektra, his skills with his targeting skills are so great that he killed her with nothing more than her own weapon and a playing card. All right. one of Daredevil's earliest enemies was the Owl. Now, the Owl did not really have any superpowers, but he took a serum that allowed him to glide for short distances. And in my research, I found out that basically what the serum had been doing was basically making his bones lighter. So, but he had to constantly use the serum, or else his bones would condense back to their normal stature. He always defeated the Daredevil, and because he was one of the earliest villains that Daredevil faced, that goes to show you how long Black Widow has been in the Daredevil storyline, because the Owl was one of the characters, I guess you could say, in like the first 10 issues of Daredevil, and he was defeated with the help of the Black Widow. One of the things that makes the Owl more notable is that he wanted to replace Kingpin as the main gang leader of New York, which provided a little contention there. The next slide. If
He looks like one of Scooby Doo.
right. Okay. So the one of the biggest enemies that they show in the Daredevil mythos, and even more so in the Elektra storyline, would be the Hand. Daredevil, being that he has this martial arts training, he in fact is basically a ninja. And this clan basically was formed in the comics, was formed back in 1588 by Master Yoshioka. Now, he founded the Hand basically to serve a demon called the Beast. Now, and this is not to be confused with the blue fuzzy guy from the X-Men. If you see, I found a picture of the Beast that's at the lower center of those pictures. And what the Beast did was basically hand over mystical powers, such as resurrection, to aid the Hand in their daily activities. Basically, the Hand, the secret society that the Hand was formed, it basically had the broken into two groups: the sickly ones, which was basically the army of the Hand, the primordial entities responsible for the knowledge and worship of the Beast on Earth. That would be the Ninja Clan. And then you had the Five, which in the Netflix series and in the comics, they did not just refer to them as the Five, but they were the five fingers of the Hand. And I think, well, all of them were shown in the Elektra movie and in not the Defenders, but the Iron Fist Netflix series. They were more prominent there, but they all stem from the Daredevil storyline. You have Madame Gao, Bakuto, Alexandra, Murakami, and Sawande. And basically, what they did, they were the ones that basically led the different factions of the Hand across the globe. You also had another group called the Snake Root Ninja Clan, but these are the older, the mystical ninjas that, if you remember from the Elektra movie, they had a group of ninja that were chasing her that basically had special powers. That was the Snake Root Ninja Clan. Now, one of the more notable enemies that Daredevil has had was sometimes an enemy. In the beginning, he was an enemy. In the end, he was a friend, but because of their differing beliefs on how criminals should be handled, they're always back and forth with each other. And that's the Punisher. Now, the Punisher was a Marine Corps veteran, Frank Castle, who became a vigilante after his wife and children were gunned down for seeing a mob hit. accidentally. They weren't part of it, but they were basically collateral damage. Um, when when after he killed those in the storyline, after the Punisher basically took care of those that were responsible for his wife and children's death, he turned himself in, and he was going to do his prison term. He was settled on it, but he was busted out by a cop who found out that he could not get any help on the street for stopping a large drug shipment that he knew was going to affect the community, but though his higher ups wanted it to go through because they said it would lead them to bigger fish, basically. Once the Punisher got broken out of prison, he found out that these same drug dealers, not only were they moving large amounts of drugs, but they were using children to push those drugs. And so he, in essence, ended up killing all of the drug dealers. Now, this is that point that where the Punisher and Daredevil come into contention. They have beef with the same groups, with the same people, but Daredevil doesn't believe in killing. He believes everybody deserves a second chance, whereas the Punisher feels, well, if I take you out of the equation now, and that means putting you in the dirt, then we don't have to worry about you later. A lot of people have thought that the Punisher was one of the better titles that went along with the Daredevil universe. And you can see down here where they have tried to do several Punisher movies or series over the years. And right now, the best one that stands is the most current, which is the Jon Bernthal character from that started in 2016. Now, and yeah, that's it for the Punisher. If you go to the next slide, you'll see just a small rogues gallery of some of the other characters that Daredevil has had to contend with. Lady Bullseye, Mr. Fear, who basically, Mr. Fear is Marvel Universe's answer to DC Comics, the Scarecrow from the Batman series. We were introduced to Mysterio in the last Spider-Man movie that came out. Typhoid Mary, she is actually introduced into the Marvel, the TV universe in the storyline of Cloak and Dagger. She's the police officer that was trying to help Cloak and Dagger, who ends up being drowned in the bayou by the Roxxon oil people. And she becomes Typhoid Mary, who basically is another anti-hero, sort of like the Punisher. Purple Man, who is indicative of the Jessica Jones franchise, is also one of Daredevil's biggest foes. And basically because he's aligned with Jessica Jones and he knows the atrocities that the Purple Man had committed. Okay. So, Eric, I think we can go into the other media that Daredevil has been in.
Yes. Okay, so I have the other media here. You have Daredevil that was released in 2003, starring Ben Affleck, Colin Farrell, and Jennifer Garner. They all three are on the end. Michael Clark Duncan back there. And this film was actually it was a Marvel collaboration with Fox at the time. They owned Daredevil, X-Men. Want to say they also owned Ghost Rider and Fantastic Four series. So there in the 2000s, there was that period of time where a lot of Marvel movies were coming out. They were all most of them were being produced by Fox, except for the Spider-Man movies, which were produced by
Sony,
yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the Daredevil 2003 film grossed worldwide $179 million. It was done on a $76 million budget, so it It did well. It also produced a spin-off, not a sequel, which was Elektra, which did not do so well. But yeah, it was a success for Fox to go ahead and produce more movies for Marvel in the 2000s. On the right, you have Daredevil. That's the partnership that was with Netflix. Marvel made a partnership with Netflix to produce some of the content. And this one premiered in 2015, April 2015. It was canceled in 2018 due to the fact that Marvel was then bought by Disney. And Disney now has their own streaming service. So, Daredevil, that's on Marvel, that's on Netflix. It's still on Netflix, but they will not be producing any more seasons. And it's still up in the air of what they're going to actually do with Daredevil. Disney has not announced anything. Marvel has not announced anything. So it's kind of just on the shelf. But it did get very good rater. It's hard to say ratings for Netflix because you don't really know what their ratings are. But it got great critical acclaim. People loved the show, it seemed like, and would have been excited to see some more seasons. And so, yeah, that's kind of where they left off. Of course, he was in the Defenders also, but yeah, I would like to see what they're going to do with it, if they're actually going to produce content for Disney Plus, or they're going to bring him into the movie universe. Who knows? It's all up in the air.
At this time, are there any questions?
Yes. Before we jump into what we read. Okay, great. Thanks. All right. Yeah, but I read as soon as it comes up here. Okay, so this session of our graphic novel club, I read Daredevil, The Man Without Fear, written by none other than the great Frank Miller. Daredevil Without Fear was 1993 to 1994. It was just a series to kind of it was sort of a reboot of the series in the late 80s. Roland had talked about it earlier when they redid his suit. They published the graphic novel in 1993, and John Romita Jr. is the artist on this graphic novel. It's basically the retelling of his origin story, from the fact of him being blinded to him meeting Elektra, going to college, meeting Elektra. So their story kind of coincides in you see them in college, their whirlwind romance, she leaving him to go avenge her father, and then them meeting back up again. And by this point in his life, he is Daredevil, and Kingpin is in there, Bullseye is in there. It's introducing his main cast of characters that kind of revolve in his life. You have Karen Page, his secretary, that's in there, and you kind of get to see it's the late 80s. Frank Miller is that style of artistry. When he did it, he rewrote it. He didn't really add much to the origin story, but what he did is it looks it's kind of has a gritty 80s look to it, and it's a great read. It's about 200 pages, but it's rough. It's kind of that gritty New York type. That's just what it looks like. It's a interesting use of colors, and he that yellow suit that he first comes out with, but it's the black suit first, then the yellow, and just kind of the people that he meets along the way in Hell's Kitchen, as not just Matt Murdock, but then as Daredevil. And so, and then you get Kingpin, who is sort of the same look that you have from the original 1960s version. But it's very violent. I'm sure it would have if it had a rating on it, I think the rating is teen or mature. But you got, by the end of it, you kind of get why he goes off and does everything that he does. And I definitely recommend it, especially this particular The Man Without Fear. It's one of the, when people tell you to read a Daredevil, if you're going to start somewhere, you should start at this one. You don't have to go all the way back to the first one, but you could start at this one and get a clear sense of who the Man Without Fear is. But it's entertaining, and it is well written and just drawn well also. Did you have one, Roland?
Yeah, the one that I liked was the Shadowland saga. And the Shadowland saga is one where right after Marvel's Dark Reign series ended, Matt Murdock went to Japan, basically to, I guess you can try to say, to calm his nerves, basically. But while he's over there, he also tries to make contact with the Hand, that demonic ninja clan, because he thinks that if he can control them or get them to work on his side, that he can get them to work for the cause of good, basically. Basically, when he comes back to Hell's Kitchen, though, people notice that he's a little darker, and when he dons he doesn't really come out of his Daredevil costume at this point in time, this is the series where he's in the black costume. He basically gets ownership of a property in Hell's Kitchen, of a building that Bullseye had destroyed during Dark Reign. He basically builds a temple for the Hand on that property. And in the ensuing storyline, he basically kills Bullseye. Now, after he kills Bullseye, some of his fellow compatriots that he had been working with in the past realize that, hey, it's something different about him. He's much more apt to kill, much more apt to create havoc, and not really worried about collateral damage. And somehow or another, they basically find out that he has not only has he taken over the Hand, but the reason why he has been able to take over the Hand is because he was possessed by the Beast. One of his ninja compatriots, the White Tiger, basically stays by his side, but they come into conflict with basically Power Man, I'll say Iron Fist and Luke Cage, because in this storyline a new Power Man is introduced. But Iron Fist, Luke Cage, Misty Knight, Moon Knight, and a couple of others decide that they don't like that there's something wrong with him, and they want to get to the bottom of it. Now, this whole time, he has basically tried to basically rule Hell's Kitchen with the iron fist, basically using the power of the Hand. One of the old masters that he dealt with contacts Elektra and tries to get Elektra to help, get the keep the hand from corrupting him. But she initially refuses and doesn't want to help. Not until she sees him kill Bullseye. At that point in time, everything changes, and basically everybody kind of jumps in, and it's kind of weird when you read it because it seems like they jump in on the side of the Kingpin, who at this time is trying to hold on to his criminal enterprises. Basically, later on, they fool around, and Iron Fist is able to basically rectify the situation by expelling the Beast from Daredevil, and he does that using his little power chi. If you noticed in the if you've seen the Netflix series, when he goes into a deep meditation and basically accesses the dragon within him, he was able to use this power to expel the Beast from Daredevil. Now, what Daredevil ends up doing at this point in time, though, is committing suicide so that the Beast cannot basically reinfest him. And the series ends with his body disappearing, but only because Elektra has basically taken him somewhere to revive him. And that's how that storyline ends. But that's one of the that's one of the darker Daredevil stories, and it was very interesting to see Daredevil, a man without fear, the man who did not believe in killing, to go down that path. So.
Yeah, I was going to say with a lot of his stories, and then you kind of see his beginning when Stan Lee created him, and he always was kind of on the. You had some of the early stuff like Fantastic Four, Spider-Man. He was created in '64, so not long after those debuts, and he was one of the darker ones because between Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Captain America, like he was situated in Hell's Kitchen, which was kind of Marvel's the place in New York City where you had your gangsters and it's kind of like the Gotham of DC to me, like that whole. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's just me comparing the two, but yeah, he was allowed to be darker than some of the other characters,
right?
Because and then on top of that, he's blind, but that didn't stop him from defeating some of the roughest criminals out there. So yeah, and he actually, I think he did it. He's done it 3 times where he's faked his death. Because you mentioned the one where Elektra had to revive him, but before that, throughout his storyline, he's faked his death a few times because Karen sold his identity. Right. He had to do that numerous times because people knew that he was Daredevil, and was putting others in danger around him.
If you know the where we were talking earlier about the black costume from '89 to '93, which was actually a throwback to his original '64 costume before the yellow and black costume. That black costume from The Man Without Fear. Remember, there was one time where Hawkeye, I think it was Hawkeye, that actually wore the Daredevil uniform for him. And basically they were trying to clear his name, so he had to, it was in one of them he didn't fake his death, but he basically let somebody else go out as Daredevil while he was in the courtroom as Matt Murdock, but in the evening, so that he could still do his thing without being seen as being in the costume, he reverted back to his all black costume. Now, he did the same thing in the Netflix series. If you notice at the end of the last season, basically he was, and in the Defenders, he was never in his red costume. He was always in the black, with it was just like a black T-shirt, black jeans, and a black bandana pulled across his face.
Huh?
So,
All right. Well, that is Daredevil, The Man Without Fear. Another one down for Marvel. I enjoyed it. Okay, we'll go to the next slide here so we can pick another one. It's just a suggestion up there, but if anybody else wants to see something new, just type it in the chat box or say it out loud, and we'll consider it. Got some suggestions for our next pick, which we'll be meeting again on September the 8th, 2 weeks from today at 4 o'clock. So I have Batwoman, the Wonder Woman, and the Flash as some suggestions, but feel free to put anything else out.
you know what? I'd say Batwoman because while everybody may not know the stories of the Flash and Wonder Woman, there's a lot of confusion between Batwoman and Batgirl.
Ah, yes.
So I say let's do Batwoman and kind of throw it out there so that those that are new to this know.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So just a reminder that we're going to do Batwoman on September 8th. But just a reminder, you can come into the library to get your graphic novels. Just check the website. Make sure you, if you want to get curbside, make sure you come between the hours of 12 and 3 to pick up your items. But you can also come in, place them on hold, come pick them up. We have quite a few of Batwoman's graphic novels, so we do not lack in those. But oh, okay, we do. Okay, Wonder Woman. Okay, all right. What do you think, Erlen?
What's
We
that?
could do Wonder Woman. So we could do Wonder Woman. We had a
Only we're gonna
suggestion.
Talk
had
about
a
the
suggestion.
possibilities of Wonder Woman 1984.
Well, that doesn't hurt us doing Wonder Woman because that is coming out in November. And DC just had a huge weekend where they premiered a lot of their stuff that's coming out, fandom weekend. So there's quite a few stuff out there right now on Wonder Woman, and we have a lot of her stuff too. And so we could put Batwoman off till next time. But yeah, Wonder Woman works also. And
Okay.
she has a plethora of information out there on her.
True.
And a very interesting backstory. So
Yeah, and Wonder Woman is one of those characters that I grew up on. I really love. I'm just trying to learn a little bit more about Batwoman.
I know.
That's
Yeah,
all.
we could do Batwoman. We could do Batwoman
No, we
at the
can
end
set
of
it up there.
September.
Okay,
No, I said we could do Batwoman at the end of September.
that's fine. I'm flexible.
Okay.
The
Look at the
comics are
ladies
coming.
leading. Look at the ladies leading yet again. But okay, all right. So Wonder Woman, actually, we're gonna do Wonder Woman, and Wonder Woman will take place on September 8th at 4 p.m. Check us out online and social media to stay up to date on what's going on in the library. So we will see you guys next time.